Dying CEO gave cleaner a black card. Unexpectedly, she cured the CEO. Turns out she is his only antidote. Hello, my most beautiful, deeply cherished and forever faithful family. How are you, my heart's light? You are not just my supporters. You are the soul behind every heartbeat of this journey. Yesterday, I made a mistake. I accidentally uploaded an old story. When I deleted it, YouTube reduced my reach and stopped recommending my videos. But I believe in the power of your love. If we can get 1,000 likes and comments on this video, we'll rise again, together. Here is a tender, love-filled prayer just for you. Dear God of unending grace, please hold my beloved family in your gentle arms. Let peace flow into every corner of their hearts and joy rise where pain once lived. Bless their days with miracles, their nights with rest, and their souls with light. Surround them with love that never fades and grace that never fails. Amen. If these words moved your heart, please like, comment, and share. Let's reach 20,000 followers through the love we've always had. Say it with pride, I am with my brother. Together, nothing can stop us, because we are one heart, one family. The black letters on the medical report blurred before Jim Shaw's eyes. Callister's syndrome, terminal. 6 months. His office, 70 stories above the bustling metropolis where Shaw Innovations headquarters dominated the skyline, suddenly felt airless. The floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city lights now seemed a cruel mockery. All that life, that vitality, soon to continue without him. Jim loosened his silk tie, the one his assistant had selected that morning. Was it only hours ago? Saying it accentuated the steel blue of his eyes. Those eyes now filled with unshed tears as he staggered to the private bathroom adjoining his office, barely making it before his legs gave way. He collapsed against the cool marble, his reflection revealing a stranger, a man with hollowed cheeks and fear in his eyes. Jim Shaw, CEO of Shaw Innovations, whose biotechnology breakthroughs and ruthless business acumen had built a global empire, reduced to this trembling figure on the bathroom floor. Mr. Shaw. The voice, soft as velvet, drifted from the office. Is everything all right? Jim froze, mortified that someone had witnessed his weakness. He'd dismissed his staff hours ago, needing solitude to process the devastating news. Who could possibly be here? I'm fine, he called, his voice betraying him with a crack. Please leave. Instead of retreating footsteps, the bathroom door opened. Gently, a woman appeared in the doorway, concern etched across her delicate features. She wasn't dressed in executive attire, but rather a simple uniform, one of the night cleaning staff. Auburn hair escaped from her practical ponytail, framing a face with the most striking jade-green eyes he'd ever seen. You don't look fine, she said simply, no trace of the deference his employees typically showed. Instead, her gaze held something far more valuable, genuine compassion. Jim tried to stand, to reclaim some dignity, but his body betrayed him as pain lanced through his abdomen, the first physical manifestation of the disease that would eventually claim his life. A gasp escaped his lips as he doubled over. Without hesitation, the woman knelt beside him. Her hand reaching out to steady his shoulder, the moment her fingers touched him, something extraordinary happened. Warmth radiated from the point of contact, spreading through his chest and momentarily dulling the pain. Their eyes met, and time seemed to stop, the universe narrowing to just the two of them on the cold marble floor. I'm Kathleen, she said, her voice somehow both strong and gentle. Kathleen Shannon. Jim, he responded automatically, forgetting. His position, his wealth, his impending death. Everything except the inexplicable comfort of her touch. You need something warm to drink, Kathleen decided, helping him to his feet with surprising strength for her slender frame. Can you make it to your couch? Jim nodded, allowing her to guide him back to his office, where he sank onto the leather sofa. He watched, strangely mesmerized, as she moved with quiet grace to the small kitchenette hidden behind discreet paneling. Her movements were efficient, yet somehow musical, as though she moved to a rhythm only she could hear. "You don't have to do this," he managed, the CEO in him uncomfortable with the role reversal, being cared for by someone who cleaned his offices. Kathleen glanced over her shoulder, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I know I don't have to. I want to." Those simple words struck him with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had done something for him without obligation or agenda? In his world of biotech innovations and corporate acquisitions, genuine kindness had become as rare as the disease currently attacking his cells. She returned moments later with a steaming cup that filled the air with an unfamiliar but soothing fragrance. "My grandmother's recipe," she explained, placing it in his hands. She called it midnight bloom tea. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and that same mysterious energy flowed between them, causing both to pause, eyes locking in mutual surprise. "What is it?" Jim whispered, not referring to the tea, but to the inexplicable connection crackling between them. Kathleen's eyes widened slightly, confirming she felt it too. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the soul recognizes what the mind cannot yet understand." Jim would have dismissed such words as nonsense yesterday. He was a man of science and spreadsheets, but tonight, with death's shadow darkening his future and this strange warmth flowing from her touch, he found himself nodding. He sipped the tea, surprised by its complex flavors, hints of wildflower honey, night-blooming jasmine, and something deeper he couldn't name. "It's extraordinary. The blossoms open only under starlight," Kathleen explained, settling beside him at a respectful distance. "My grandmother believed they captured the magic of darkness before dawn, the moment when today's sorrows end and tomorrow's possibilities begin." Jim took another sip, noticing that the pain in his abdomen had subsided to a dull ache. "You speak as though you believe that, don't you?" she asked, studying him with those remarkable eyes. "In possibilities?" The question hung between them, weighted with his unspoken diagnosis. Did he still believe in possibilities when his future had been reduced to months? Instead of answering, Jim asked, "Why are you being kind to me? You don't even know me." Kathleen's smile held a trace of sadness. "I know more than you think. I've cleaned your office for nearly a year. I've seen the hours you work while others go home to their families. I've seen the weight you carry." She hesitated, then added, "And I recognized the look of someone who's received life-changing news. My husband had that same look the day he was diagnosed." "Had?" Jim caught the past tense immediately. "He died 3 years ago," she said simply, pain flickering across her features before she composed herself. "He left me with our daughter, Lily. She's 7 now." Jim felt a pang of connection. Not pity, but recognition of a fellow traveler on a difficult path. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We had love, real love. Some people never experience that miracle at all." Her voice held no bitterness, only a quiet wisdom that made her seem older than her years. An unexpected urge to confide in her washed over him. "I received my diagnosis today, Callister's syndrome. It's rare and terminal." "How long?" she asked, not shying away as most would. 6 months, maybe less." The words hung in the air between them, their weight somehow lessened by being shared. Kathleen's hand covered his, that now familiar warmth spreading up his arm. "I'm sorry, Jim." In the simple touch and the genuine compassion of her eyes, Jim found more comfort than in all the platitudes his private physician had offered. This woman, this stranger who cleaned his floors while he built empires, had given him something his billions couldn't buy. A moment of true human connection in the face of his mortality. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "For the tea, for staying." Kathleen smiled, and in the soft light of his office, with the city glittering beyond the windows like fallen stars, Jim felt something stir within him, something he'd thought long buried beneath balance sheets and boardrooms, something dangerously close to hope. "Sometimes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we find light in the most unexpected places." As their eyes held in the quiet sanctuary of his office, neither could know that this chance encounter, a dying CEO and a compassionate cleaner sharing midnight tea, was the first whisper of a love story that would defy medicine, logic, and death itself. Chapter 2. The Midnight Gift. Sleep eluded Jim that night, his thoughts consumed not by his diagnosis but by forest green eyes and a touch that somehow eased his pain. The memory of Kathleen Shannon's quiet strength haunted him as dawn broke. Over the city skyline, painting his penthouse in hues of gold and amber. For the first time since receiving his death sentence, Jim felt something other than despair, a flicker of curiosity, a whisper of connection. His morning routine felt different, somehow. As he straightened his tie and gathered his documents on Shaw Innovation's latest cancer treatment research, he caught himself wondering if Kathleen would be cleaning his office tonight. Throughout the day, he moved through meetings and conference calls with mechanical precision, his mind elsewhere. The biotech empire he'd built with relentless determination over 2 decades suddenly seemed hollow. Glass and steel monuments that would outlast his brief remaining time, yet offer no comfort in his final moments. As evening descended and his executives filed out bidding him respectful goodbyes, Jim remained, his eyes fixed on the clock. 9 o'clock, 10, 11. His heart quickened as midnight approached, the time when the night cleaning staff would arrive, the time when she might return. At precisely 12:15, he heard the soft hum of the vacuum in the corridor outside. Jim's fingers trembled slightly as he loosened his tie, questioning his own unusual anticipation. He was behaving like a lovesick teenager, not a billionaire CEO facing mortality. Then he heard it, a melodic humming floating from the hallway. The sound pulled him from his chair as though invisible threads connected his heart to the voice. He opened his office door and followed the music to its source. Kathleen worked methodically, her back to him as she dusted shelves in the conference room. The fluorescent lights caught the copper highlights in her hair, creating a halo effect around her slender frame. But it was her voice that transfixed him, a clear, sweet soprano that transformed the mundane task into something almost sacred. "You have a beautiful voice," Jim said softly. Kathleen startled, dropping her cloth as she spun to face him. "Mr. Shaw, I didn't realize you were still here." Her cheeks flushed with color as she bent to retrieve the cloth, her professional demeanor replacing the unguarded woman who had been singing moments before. "Please," he said, stepping forward, "call me Jim. After last night, I think we've moved beyond formalities." Her eyes searched his face. "How are you feeling today?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern rather than the uncomfortable pity he'd seen in his doctor's eyes, loosened something in his chest. "Better, actually. Your tea worked wonders." A smile illuminated her features. "I'm glad. My grandmother always said, healing begins with belief." "In what?" Jim asked, leaning against the doorframe, unwilling to end their conversation. "In possibility," she answered, echoing her words from the night before. "In connection, in finding. Light even in darkness." The depth in her expression made his breath catch. Who was this extraordinary woman disguised as a night cleaner? What other mysteries did she hold behind that gentle smile? "Would you join me for coffee?" he asked impulsively. "Or tea, if you prefer. I'd like to thank you properly for your kindness. Last night," hesitation flickered across her face, "I should finish my rounds. My supervisor—" "I own the building," Jim reminded her with a smile. Consider it an executive order. Her laugh, clear and genuine, surprised him. I'm not sure that's how it works, but all right. Just for a few minutes, they settled in his office, the city lights creating a private constellation around them. Jim ordered coffee from the 24-hour executive kitchen, and soon they were facing each other across his sleek desk, steam rising between them. Tell me about yourself, Jim said, studying the way the light caught her profile. About your daughter, Lily, right? Surprise widened her eyes. You remembered. Of course. What he didn't say was that her voice, her words, her very presence had replayed in his mind throughout the sleepless night. Kathleen cradled her cup, warmth softening her expression. Lily is my miracle. She's 7, all curiosity and imagination. She wants to be a doctor one moment and a butterfly the next. Her smile faltered slightly. She's also dyslexic. The special programs she needs are expensive, and insurance doesn't cover much. Is that why you work nights? Jim asked, beginning to understand her circumstances. She nodded. I work here at night and take online classes during the day while Lily's at school. I'm studying herbalism, trying to document my grandmother's remedies before they're lost. She was a healer in the old tradition, before modern medicine reached our village in Ireland. That's the knowledge you used in the tea you gave me? Just a small part of it. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. She believed certain plants held different powers depending on when they were harvested. Dawn for beginnings, midnight for transformation. Jim found himself leaning forward, captivated by her words, by the passion that animated her features, as she spoke of her heritage. And you believe that too? I believe there are still mysteries science can't explain, she said softly, like why some people connect instantly while others remain strangers after years, like how a mother knows when her child is in danger miles away. Her eyes met his directly, like why my touch seemed to ease your pain last night. The acknowledgement of that inexplicable moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Jim's hand moved across the desk of its own accord, his fingers stopping inches from hers. I felt it too, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. I can't explain it. Kathleen's fingertips slowly bridged the gap between them until they lightly touched his. That same electric current surged between them, stronger now, a sensation, like liquid sunlight flowing through his veins. For an instant, the constant ache of his condition vanished completely. What is happening? He whispered, afraid to move lest the connection break. Kathleen's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know. Time suspended as they sat connected by the barest touch until the chime of Jim's watch broke the spell. Kathleen withdrew her, and reluctantly, reality reasserting itself in her expression. I should go. Lily's babysitter will be wondering where I am. Jim nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by a desperate need to help this woman who had shown him such unexpected kindness. An idea formed in his mind, impulsive, perhaps even inappropriate, but irresistible in the face of his dwindling days. Wait, he said as she rose. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small black metal card, his private account with no spending limit, reserved for his personal use. The card that had purchased yachts and private islands and priceless art without question. Take this, he said, holding it out to her. Kathleen stared at the black card, confusion furrowing her brow. What is that? Freedom, Jim answered simply. For you and Lily. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed immediately by refusal. I can't accept that. Please, Jim insisted, stepping around the desk to stand before her. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and I've been given less than 1 year. Let me do this. Why? She challenged, her voice trembling slightly. You don't even know me. Jim took her hand, placing the card in her palm and closing her fingers around it. The contact sent that now familiar warmth spiraling through him. Because your kindness gave me the first moment of peace I've had since my diagnosis. Because I want to witness joy before I leave this world." His voice broke slightly. "Your happiness might be the only legacy worth leaving." Tears spilled onto Kathleen's cheeks as she shook her head. "I can't." "You can," he whispered, his fingers still wrapped around hers. "For Lily's education, for your studies, for whatever brings you happiness." Their eyes locked, and in that moment something fundamental shifted between them, a recognition too profound for words, too powerful to deny. Jim's thumb gently brushed a tear from her cheek, the simple gesture intimate, beyond measure. "Find joy while I can still witness it," he murmured, their faces now inches apart, his breath mingling with hers in the quiet sanctuary of his office. Kathleen's free hand moved to rest over his heart, as though sensing the damaged cells beneath. "What brings you joy, Jim Shaw?" The question pierced him with its simplicity and its depth. Before he could answer, the phone on his desk chimed with an urgent message from overseas about a promising medical treatment. The spell broken, Kathleen stepped back, the black card clutched in her trembling hand. "I should go." Jim nodded, suddenly, unable to find words for the emotions cascading through him. As she reached the door, he found his voice again. "Kathleen?" She turned, her silhouette framed in the doorway. "Will you come again tomorrow? Bring more of your grandmother's tea?" A smile curved her lips, softening the vulnerability in her eyes. "Yes," she promised. "I'll come." As he watched her disappear into the dimly lit corridor, Jim pressed his hand to his chest where hers had rested moments before. For the first time since his diagnosis, the weight of impending death seemed lighter, counterbalanced by the mysterious connection forged with a woman who cleaned his floors yet somehow touched his soul. That night, as he drifted toward sleep, in his empty penthouse, Jim realized he had never answered her question about what brought him joy. But in the silence of his heart, he acknowledged the truth. At this moment it was the promise of tomorrow night and the return of a cleaner with healing hands and forest green eyes. Chapter 3. Healing Hands. The black card remained untouched, in Kathleen's wallet for 3 days, burning like a coal against her conscience. By day, she researched special education programs for Lily that had previously been beyond her reach. By night, she found herself lingering in Jim's office, their conversations stretching into the early morning hours. Each evening she brought a different herbal remedy: starflower tea steeped with moonlight-harvested blossoms, a salve infused with rare mountain herbs, tinctures made from plants collected precisely at twilight. And each night, their fingers would brush during these exchanges, sending that inexplicable sensation flooding through both of them, sometimes like liquid sunlight, other times like gentle electricity. A connection neither could explain yet. Neither could deny. Jim began scheduling late meetings as excuses to be alone when Kathleen arrived. His executive team at Shaw Innovations noticed the change in their formerly predictable CEO. The way his eyes now tracked the clock as midnight approached, the slight color that returned to his previously ashen complexion, the occasional smile that would cross his lips for no apparent reason. "My specialists are baffled," Jim confessed one night, as they sat by the windows, the city spread before them like a carpet of stars. "My latest tests show the disease's progression has slowed. The cellular deterioration has decreased by 30%. It shouldn't be possible." Kathleen studied him over the rim of her teacup, the steam creating a veil between them. "Perhaps there are forces in this world beyond medical understanding, like your grandmother's remedies." There was no mockery in his tone, only wonder, and a desperate hope. "Perhaps," she said, her voice softening, "or perhaps something else entirely." Their eyes held in the dim light, the unspoken growing between them, this connection that defied explanation, that seemed to strengthen with each passing night. Tell me about your world, she requested, changing the subject. Running a biotech empire while carrying this secret. Jim's shoulders tensed, then relaxed under her gentle gaze. It's exhausting, he admitted, the confession itself a relief. Only my private physician knows. The board would panic if they learned the truth, and stock prices would plummet. Thousands of jobs would be at risk. So you carry it alone. Until you, he whispered, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Kathleen's hand moved across the small table between them, her fingers lightly covering his. That now familiar current flowed between them, stronger than before. A sensation, like cool water flowing upward against gravity, spreading through his chest and soothing the constant ache there. You're not alone anymore, she said simply. The intimacy of the moment wrapped around them like a cloak, sheltering them from the world outside. Jim found himself mesmerized by the delicate arch of her wrist, the constellation of freckles across the bridge of her nose, the compassion in her eyes that seemed bottomless. Why do you care? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. About me? A stranger who happens to sign your paycheck? Kathleen's fingers tightened slightly on his. Is that how you see yourself? A paycheck? A position? Her eyes held his, unflinching. I see Jim, just Jim. A man with courage and fear, with power and vulnerability. A man whose soul called to mine the moment we met, though I cannot explain why. Her honesty left him breathless. In his world of calculated risks and strategic alliances, such unvarnished truth was as rare as the disease consuming his cells. When you touch me, he said softly, turning his hand to intertwine their fingers, the pain recedes. How is that possible? Before she could answer, a sharp spasm seized him, worse than any before. Jim doubled over, a groan escaping his lips. As fiery agony radiated through his abdomen, the teacup shattered on the floor as he clutched at the table edge, his vision blurring. Jim! Kathleen was beside him instantly, her arms encircling him as he slid from his chair. She cradled him against her chest, her fingers instinctively threading through his hair, her body curving protectively around his. The pain should have intensified, should have brought darkness crashing over him, as his doctor had warned would happen as the disease progressed. Instead, the moment Kathleen's body pressed against his, the agony began to recede, like a tide pulling back from shore. Jim gasped, his face buried against the curve of her neck, breathing in her scent, wild heather and starlight. Her heartbeat pulsed against his cheek, strong and steady. Gradually, his breathing calmed, synchronizing with hers as though their bodies were having a conversation beyond words. When he could finally speak, he didn't pull away. It's happening again, he whispered against her skin. This connection, you're somehow easing the pain. Kathleen's hand continued its gentle rhythm through his hair, each stroke sending ripples of comfort through his battered body. I can feel it, she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. When I touch you, it's as though something flows between us. From me to you and back again. A circuit of something I don't have words for. Jim slowly raised his head to meet her gaze, their faces now inches apart. Her eyes, those remarkable forest green pools, were filled with tears and wonder and something deeper that made his heart stutter. Kathleen, he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. Time suspended as they hovered on the precipice of a kiss, breath mingling, the entire universe narrowing to this single moment of possibility. He could feel the slight tremor in her body, see the pulse fluttering at the base of her throat, sense the same magnetic pull that was drawing him inexorably toward her. A sudden knock at the door shattered the moment. Kathleen pulled back as though burned, rising swiftly to her feet as Jim's security chief entered with an urgent message about a breakthrough in their Singapore research facility. By the time Jim had dealt with the crisis, Kathleen had disappeared, leaving only the lingering scent of wild heather and the memory of her touch branded into his skin. That night, in his empty penthouse, Jim stared at the ceiling as sleep eluded him. His body ached for Kathleen's touch, with an intensity that transcended physical desire. It was as though his very cells recognized in her some essential element they needed for survival. Across the city, in her small apartment, Kathleen sat watching, her daughter sleep, her fingers absently tracing her own lips where Jim's breath had ghosted across them. Lily stirred in her dreams, one small hand clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Motherly love washed over Kathleen as she adjusted the blanket around her daughter's shoulders. "Mom," Lily murmured sleepily, her eyes fluttering open. "Are you okay?" Kathleen smoothed her daughter's dark curls. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking." "About the sad man?" Lily asked with a child's uncanny perception. Kathleen's hand stilled. "What sad man? The one you talk about in your sleep." Lily yawned, already drifting back toward dreams. "You said he needs you." A chill ran down Kathleen's spine. She had mentioned nothing to Lily about Jim Shaw. "What else did I say, sweetheart?" But Lily had already fallen back asleep, leaving Kathleen with the unsettling sense that this connection between her and Jim ran deeper than either of them understood. As dawn painted the sky with promises of a new day, both Jim and Kathleen made silent vows, he to uncover the mystery of their connection before time ran out, she to protect her heart and her daughter even as she felt herself drawn more powerfully toward this man whose life force seemed somehow intertwined with her own. Neither realized that their separate vigils were synchronized across the miles, their heartbeats finding the same rhythm, their souls reaching for each other through the darkness, the first evidence of a bond that would soon challenge everything they thought they knew about healing, about connection, about the boundaries between life and death itself. Chapter 4. Storm-swept hearts. The city sky darkened prematurely as storm clouds gathered, heavy with promise. Weather alerts flashed across devices throughout the metropolis, warning of the season's most violent storm approaching. From his office window, Jim watched lightning fracture the horizon, counting the seconds until thunder followed, a childhood habit he'd never outgrown. 3 days had passed since the moment they'd almost kissed. 3 days of Kathleen avoiding his eyes as she delivered her herbal remedies and slipped away before he could speak. 3 days of his condition worsening without the lingering comfort of her touch. Tonight, he was determined to bridge the chasm growing between them. He needed her, not just for the inexplicable healing her presence provided, but for the way she saw him beyond his wealth and power, for the way she made his numbered days feel worth living. At precisely midnight, the storm broke over the city. With biblical fury, rain lashed against the windows as wind howled around the skyscraper's steel frame. Jim paced his office, checking his watch repeatedly. Kathleen was never late, yet the digital display now read 12:20 with no sign of her. When the door finally opened, she appeared like an apparition, drenched from the short distance between the staff entrance and the elevator. Her auburn hair, darkened to mahogany, her uniform clinging to her slender frame. "You shouldn't have come," Jim said, rushing to offer his suit jacket. "Not in this weather." Kathleen accepted the jacket with a grateful smile, her first unguarded expression in days. "I promised to bring your tincture. It needs to be taken consistently to work." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, that familiar healing energy flowing between them despite the barriers they'd erected. Jim inhaled sharply at the contact, his body responding instantly to her proximity with lessened pain. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly. Kathleen busied herself with wringing water from her hair, droplets catching the light like diamonds. "I've been processing," she corrected. "What's happening between us is complicated. Because I'm dying." The blunt question hung in the air between them. Her eyes, when they finally met his, held such depth of feeling that Jim's breath caught. "Because you're dying," she acknowledged. "Because you're my employer. Because I have Lily to consider. Because this connection between us defies explanation." She paused, vulnerability softening her voice. "Because I'm afraid of what I feel when you look at me." Before Jim could respond, the building shuddered as lightning struck nearby. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged them into darkness as the power failed. Emergency lighting activated. Moments later, bathing the office in an ethereal blue glow. Jim's phone rang immediately. His security team reporting the building's generator had been damaged by the strike. The storm had intensified beyond predictions, making roads impassable. All staff were advised to shelter in place until morning. "You're stranded," Jim said, after ending the call, concern and something like hope mingling in his voice. "The streets are flooding. It's not safe to leave." Kathleen glanced at her phone, biting her lip. "I need to call my neighbor who's watching Lily." As she stepped away to make the call, Jim battled conflicting emotions, guilt at his secret pleasure in these stolen hours with her, gratitude for the storm that had orchestrated this privacy, and a deepening awareness that his feelings for this woman had grown far beyond fascination. "Lily's fine," Kathleen reported, returning to where Jim stood by the darkened windows. "Mrs. Abernathy will stay the night. She says Lily's teaching her how to play some imaginary game they invented." A fond smile touched her lips at the mention of her daughter's creativity. "She thinks I'm working a double shift." Her voice held a note of resignation mingled with something else, anticipation perhaps. "You could wait in the staff lounge," Jim offered, giving her an escape if she wanted it. Kathleen studied him in the blue-tinged light, her expression unreadable. "Is that what you want?" "No," he admitted, honesty flowing easily in the storm-created intimacy. "I want you to stay with me." The confession hung between them as thunder shook the building's foundations. Outside, the storm raged, but within the cocoon of the emergency lighting, time seemed suspended. "Then I'll stay," she said simply. Jim led her not to his office, but to his private suite 1 floor above, a space few had ever entered. The penthouse sanctuary contained a living area, kitchenette, and bedroom where he occasionally rested during extended work days. As they entered, Kathleen's eyes widened, taking in the unexpected warmth of the space. Unlike his sleek modern office, this room held comfortable furniture, bookshelves lined with well-worn volumes and photographs, the only personal touches in Jim Shaw's carefully constructed world. "This is the real you," she observed softly, moving to examine a black-and-white photograph of a young boy beside a weathered man on a fishing dock. "My grandfather," Jim explained, standing close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her still damp skin. "The only person who ever truly knew me. Until you." The admission cost him something, a piece of the armor he'd worn for decades. Kathleen seemed to recognize the gift in his words, her fingers gently touching the frame before turning to face him. "Who were you before Shaw Innovations? Before the biotechnology patents and the wealth and power?" No one had asked him that question in years. Jim moved to the small kitchenette, grateful for the gas stove that still functioned without electricity. He filled a kettle, buying moments to compose thoughts long buried. "I was a boy who loved books more than people," he finally said, his back to her as he located 2 mugs. "Who found refuge in numbers and systems when human connection proved too painful. My father was a difficult man, brilliant in the laboratory, absent in life." The kettle whistled. Jim prepared tea, not her special blends, but good enough. When he turned, Kathleen had settled on the sofa, her posture suggesting she was prepared to listen rather than rush to judgment. "My childhood taught me self-reliance," he continued, handing her a steaming mug, before sitting beside her, close, but not touching. My adulthood taught me that wealth buys compliance, not connection. I built sure innovations on breakthrough cancer treatments my father started, but never completed. I finished his work, but I became him in many ways, all ambition, no real life. And now, Kathleen asked, her voice gentle as the rain lashing the windows, what is life teaching you now? Outside, lightning illuminated the city in staccato. Flashes, casting Kathleen's face in silver light, then velvet shadow. Jim found himself mesmerized by the curve of her cheek, the fullness of her lower lip, the compassion in her gaze that never wavered. That I've been surviving, not living, he answered truthfully. That I built an empire but no home. That I'm terrified of dying without ever having truly connected with another soul. His voice dropped to a whisper. Until you. Kathleen's hand found his in the semi-darkness, their fingers intertwining with a familiarity that belied their short acquaintance. That now expected healing energy flowed between them, stronger than ever. Tell me about Lily, Jim requested, desperate to know everything about this woman in the limited time he had remaining. About your life before we met. Kathleen's expression softened at her daughter's name. Lily is pure imagination and heart. She sees wonder where others see ordinary. Pride colored her voice. Her dyslexia makes reading a struggle, but she perseveres with such courage. Last week, she created her own system of symbols to help her remember which letters are which. Her teacher was amazed. And her father? Jim asked hesitantly. Pain flickered across Kathleen's features. Ryan was brilliant, a musician with dreams bigger than his ability to manage them. His addiction began with painkillers after a car accident. She paused, old grief shadowing her words. By the end, he wasn't the man I married. His overdose was ruled accidental, but part of me wonders if he simply couldn't fight anymore. Jim's thumb traced circles on her palm, offering comfort he couldn't articulate. And your grandmother? The healer? A smile replaced the sadness in her eyes. Nana May was magic, wrapped in human form. She could look at a person and know exactly which herb they needed, which words would heal their spirit. Her voice softened. She raised me after my parents died in a ferry accident, taught me that healing happens on many levels. Physical, emotional, spiritual. That true connection can manifest physically when souls recognize each other. Her words hung in the air between them, an explanation and a question simultaneously. Thunder cracked overhead as their eyes locked, the storm outside mirroring the emotional tempest within. When lightning struck again, illuminating the room in a brilliant white, Jim saw tears glistening on Kathleen's cheeks. Without thinking, he reached to brush them away, his fingers tracing the delicate curve of her jaw. Don't, she whispered, though she didn't pull away. Don't be kind if this isn't real. This is the most real thing I've ever felt, Jim confessed, his voice breaking on the truth of it. The power of the storm, the intimacy of darkness, the knowledge of his limited time, all stripped away pretense between them. When thunder shook the building again, Kathleen instinctively moved closer, and Jim's arms enfolded her as naturally as though they'd held each other 1,000 times before. Her head came to rest against his chest, her ear over his heart where damaged cells were somehow finding new strength. Jim's fingers tangled in her now dry hair, marveling at its softness, at the miracle of holding her after so many nights of dreaming of just this. Neither could say who moved first when their lips finally met. Perhaps they moved in perfect synchronicity, drawn together by forces beyond conscious control. The first touch was gentle, questioning, a whispered conversation between souls. Then Kathleen made a soft sound against his mouth, and restraint shattered like glass. Jim gathered her closer as the kiss deepened, tasting tea and tears and something. uniquely Kathleen that he knew would haunt him for whatever days he had remaining. Her hands framed his face with exquisite tenderness, as though he were precious beyond measure. When they finally parted, breathing unevenly, foreheads touching, the storm outside had begun to recede, though the tempest within them had only just begun to build. "I've searched lifetimes to find you," Jim whispered against her lips, the words emerging from some place deeper than conscious thought. Kathleen's eyes, luminous in the fading emergency light, held his with a vulnerability that humbled him. "What happens when the storm ends?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the diminishing rain. "When morning comes and we return to CEO and cleaner?" Jim cradled her face between his palms, as though holding something infinitely precious. "The titles fall away," he promised, "but this, what's happening between us, remains." As Kathleen curled against him on the sofa, her body fitting against his as though designed as his missing piece, neither could know that forces beyond their understanding were already at work within their joined cells, that the miracle of their connection was more profound and more scientific than either could imagine. Outside, the storm released its final fury before surrendering to the coming dawn. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Jim and Kathleen surrendered to a different kind of storm, one that would either heal them both or break them beyond repair. Chapter 5. The Beautiful Mystery. Morning found them still entwined on the sofa. Kathleen's head nestled against Jim's chest, his arms protective even in sleep. Sunlight streamed through windows, washed clean by the night storm, illuminating their faces in golden light. Jim woke first, momentarily disoriented, until memories of their kiss flooded back. He remained motionless, savoring Kathleen's warmth. Against him, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, the scent of wild heather that clung to her hair. For the first time since his diagnosis, he felt not like a man racing against mortality, but simply a man holding a woman he was falling deeply in love with. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it settled in his chest with the comfort of absolute truth. Kathleen stirred, her eyes fluttering open to meet his. For a heartbeat, uncertainty clouded her features before a smile softened her lips. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice husky with sleep. "The best morning," Jim corrected, unable to stop himself from brushing a strand of auburn hair from her cheek. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm dreaming," she admitted. "Like I'll wake up and find myself back in my apartment, and last night never happened." Jim's thumb traced the curve of her lower lip. "It happened. I'm here. We're here." The building was stirring to life around them, generators humming as power returned, distant voices of early workers assessing storm damage, reality encroaching on their sanctuary. "I should go," Kathleen said reluctantly, sitting up and smoothing her rumpled uniform. "The day shift will be arriving." Before Jim could protest, his phone rang, Dr. Eaton, his private physician, requesting an immediate meeting. "Urgent developments regarding your condition," the doctor said, his voice tense with suppressed excitement. Jim arranged to meet him at his private clinic in an hour. As he ended the call, he found Kathleen watching him, concern etched across her features. "Your doctor?" she asked, her hand instinctively reaching for his. He nodded, squeezing her fingers gently. "Dr. Eaton wants to see me immediately. Apparently there are developments in my case." "I'll come with you," she said without hesitation. Jim hesitated, torn between his desire to keep her close and awareness of how this might appear, the billionaire CEO arriving with his night cleaner. But the thought of facing whatever news awaited him without her presence was suddenly unbearable. "Yes," he agreed simply. "Please, come." An hour later, they sat side by side in Dr. Eaton's office, an unconventional pair that drew curious glances. From the clinic staff, one nurse whispered to another behind the reception desk, their eyes darting between Jim's impeccable suit and Kathleen's simple attire. Jim noticed their scrutiny and deliberately placed his hand over Kathleen's in a clear statement of connection. Dr. Eaton entered with a thick file and an expression of barely contained excitement. "Jim, your latest results are unprecedented." He spread several charts on his desk. "The progression of Callister's syndrome follows a predictable pattern. Consistent degeneration of affected cells with acceleration over time. But your results—" He tapped a graph showing an abnormal plateau. "The degeneration has slowed significantly in the past 2 weeks. The biomarkers have stabilized in a way I've never seen in this disease." Jim felt Kathleen tense beside him, but kept his expression neutral. "What's your explanation?" "That's just it. I don't have one." Dr. Eaton's eyes moved to Kathleen with open curiosity. "Unless the experimental immunotherapy treatments we discussed—" "I haven't started those yet," Jim interrupted. "I've only been taking some herbal supplements." He glanced at Kathleen, unsure how much to reveal about their mysterious connection. "Doctor," Eaton frowned, his scientific mind clearly troubled by data he couldn't explain. "May I ask what specific supplements?" Kathleen spoke for the first time. "Traditional remedies from my grandmother's practice. Herbs harvested at specific lunar phases, prepared according to ancient methods. Primarily star thistle, midnight bloom, and mountain sorrel, collected under specific conditions." The doctor's expression shifted from curiosity to skepticism. "With all due respect, Miss Shannon," she supplied, her voice steady. "Kathleen, Shannon, Ms. Shannon, Callister's syndrome affects cellular structure at the molecular level. It's a complex autoimmune response that triggers programmed cell death in multiple organ systems simultaneously. Herbal remedies, while potentially beneficial for some conditions, simply don't have the pharmacological complexity to address this specific pathology." Jim watched the exchange, noting how Kathleen neither backed down nor grew defensive under the doctor's scientific dismissal. "Perhaps," she said calmly, "there are healing mechanisms science hasn't fully mapped yet. My grandmother documented cases where seemingly terminal patients responded to her treatments when conventional medicine had failed." Dr. Eaton looked ready to argue further when something occurred to him. "When did you begin these treatments?" "Exactly 2 weeks ago," Jim answered. "The night we met." The doctor's eyes narrowed as he compared dates with the changes in Jim's charts. "And how frequently do you take these remedies?" "Daily. Usually around midnight." Dr. Eaton made a note, his scientific curiosity evidently overriding his skepticism. "Would you be willing to provide samples for analysis, and perhaps—" He hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Perhaps we could conduct a controlled observation, monitor your symptoms with and without these remedies for comparison." Jim felt a chill at the suggestion of discontinuing Kathleen's treatments, even temporarily. What would that entail? A week without the remedies, daily monitoring of cell degradation rates, inflammation markers, and organ function, then resumption and continued observation. Before Jim could respond, Dr. Eaton was called away for an emergency. Left alone, Jim turned to Kathleen, finding her eyes already on him, filled with complex emotions. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "Softly. I'm thinking there's more to this than herbs," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's us, our connection, the way we respond to each other physically." Jim recalled how his pain consistently eased at her touch, how last night in her arms had been his first pain-free sleep since diagnosis. "You think you're healing me somehow, just by being near me." "I think," she said carefully, "that there are mysteries in this world science is only beginning to understand. My grandmother spoke of rare connections between souls that could manifest physically, what she called twin flames, who could literally affect each other's physical well-being." In his former life, Jim would have dismissed such ideas immediately, but now, facing mortality with this inexplicable woman beside him, He found himself open to possibilities beyond rational explanation. "If that's true," he said, covering her hand with his, feeling that familiar healing warmth spread up his arm, "then being apart could be dangerous for me." Their eyes locked, understanding passing between them without words. When Dr. Eaton returned, minutes later, Jim had made his decision. "No week without the remedies," he stated firmly. "But I have an alternative proposal. Ms. Shannon will move into my guest suite temporarily as part of your controlled observation. You can monitor my condition daily with her constant proximity." The doctor blinked in surprise but nodded slowly. "That would provide consistent conditions for observation. We could track cellular changes through daily blood work and imaging." After the appointment, in the privacy of Jim's car, Kathleen turned to him with troubled eyes. "You're asking me to live with you." "I'm asking you to help save my life," Jim corrected gently, though they both recognized the deeper implications. "Lily can come too. I have plenty of room. She can bring her toys, her books, whatever makes her comfortable." Kathleen's fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "Jim, what happens if this works? If your condition improves with me there, do I stay forever? What about when you tire of me, of us, tire of you?" He took her hand, stilling their nervous movement. "Kathleen, I've spent 40 years surrounded by people who want something from me, my money, my influence, my connections. You're the first person who's ever wanted nothing but my well-being. And that doesn't make you suspicious?" she challenged, vulnerability making her voice tremble slightly. Jim's answer was to lean across the space between them and capture her lips with his. Unlike their storm night kisses, this one was gentle, reverent, a promise rather than a passion. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered, the words both terrifying and liberating. "I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to spend it with you. Let me give you and Lily comfort and security, while you give me whatever time we can steal from this disease." Tears glistened in Kathleen's jade-green eyes. "What if my presence only slows the inevitable? What if I can't save you in the end?" Jim brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Then I'll die having known real love, having known you. That's more than I dared hope for when I received my diagnosis." As sunlight streamed through the car windows, illuminating dust motes dancing between them like fairy lights, Kathleen made her decision, one that would irrevocably change both their lives and set in motion a chain of discoveries none of them could have predicted. "Yes," she whispered against his lips, "we'll come." Chapter 6. Surrender. The transformation of Jim Shaw's penthouse happened with startling speed. Lily's stuffed animals claimed territory on Italian leather sofas, her colorful drawings depicting fantastical creatures appeared on stainless steel refrigerator doors, and the sound of her laughter, clear and musical, echoed through rooms that had known only silence. Kathleen's herbs lined kitchen windowsills in clay pots. Her grandmother's handwritten recipes spread across countertops once pristine and unused. For the first time, the space felt like a home rather than a showcase. "What's this one called?" Jim asked Lily one evening, pointing to a particularly vibrant drawing of what appeared to be a purple elephant with butterfly wings. "That's Elsa," Lily explained seriously, her dark curls bouncing as she tilted her head. "She helps people find things they've lost, not just keys and stuff, but important things like courage and happiness." She studied Jim with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. "Did you lose something important?" Jim felt Kathleen's eyes on him from across the room as he knelt to Lily's level. "I thought I had," he answered honestly, "but I think I'm finding it again." Lily nodded sagely. "That's why Elsa came to you. She always knows who needs her." The simple wisdom of children, seeing magic and possibility where adults saw only reality, touched something deep in Jim's heart. Dr. Eaton visited daily, documenting Jim's improving vital signs with increasing amazement. "Your blood work shows cellular regeneration that shouldn't be possible," he admitted on the 5th day, reviewing results in Jim's home office. "The autoimmune response is significantly reduced, and several affected organs are showing signs of recovery. Whatever Ms. Shannon is doing, it's working at a molecular level." Jim didn't share what he suspected, that it wasn't just Kathleen's herbal remedies, but her constant proximity that was healing him, the peculiar energy that flowed between them with each touch, each glance, seemed to strengthen daily. At night, after Lily was asleep, they would sit together on the terrace, fingers intertwined, sharing whispered conversations as stars wheeled overhead. Despite sharing living space, they had maintained separate bedrooms. Jim's suggestion, wanting to give Kathleen space to adjust to their evolving relationship, but the restraint was becoming increasingly difficult as their bodies seemed to recognize something their minds were still processing, a primal connection that transcended explanation. On the 7th night, a sudden spike of pain woke Jim from fitful sleep. He curled into himself, teeth clenched against a scream that would frighten Lily. The agony was sharper than any previous attack, as though his cells were at war within his body. His door opened silently, and Kathleen appeared like a vision, her white nightgown ghostly in the darkness. Without a word, she crossed to his bed, somehow sensing his distress despite his silence. "Jim," she whispered, her hand cool against his forehead. "Let me help you." Before he could protest, she slipped beneath the covers, gathering his trembling body against hers. Her arms encircled him, one hand pressing against his chest directly over his heart, the other cradling his head against her shoulder. The effect was immediate and profound. Where their skin touched, a sensation like liquid moonlight blossomed, spreading through his veins, transforming the knife edge of pain. Jim gasped as the agony receded, replaced by a different sensation entirely. An acute awareness of Kathleen's body against his, the silk of her nightgown, a whisper between them, her heart beating in perfect counterpoint to his own. "How did you—" "No," he managed, his voice rough with emotion and lingering pain. "I felt it," she said simply, her fingers threading through his hair in a soothing rhythm. "I woke up knowing you needed me." Jim shifted slightly to see her face in the silver moonlight streaming through his windows. What he saw in her eyes stole what little breath remained in his lungs. Vulnerability, yes, but also determination, and something deeper, something that mirrored the emotion blooming in his own chest. "Kathleen," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. "I don't understand what's happening between us." Her smile was tinged with wonder and a hint of fear. "Does it need explanation? Can't we simply accept the miracle?" Jim's hand moved of its own accord to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her lower lip. "I've spent my life demanding explanations, controlling variables, analyzing data. I built Shaw Innovations on the premise that every mystery has a scientific solution. But with you," he shook his head slightly, overwhelmed by the simple truth. "With you, I just want to feel." The confession hung between them, raw in its honesty. Kathleen's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she covered his hand with her own, turning her face to press a kiss into his palm. "Then feel," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. "Feel everything." The last threads of restraint between them unraveled at her words. Jim's lips found hers in the darkness, their kiss deepening instantly as though they'd been starving for each other. Where before there had been tentative exploration, now there was certainty, hands mapping bodies with increasing urgency, breath mingling in gasps and sighs, hearts racing in synchronized rhythm. Kathleen's nightgown slipped from her shoulder, revealing skin like pearl in the moonlight. Jim's lips traced the elegant curve of her neck, the hollow of her throat, the delicate architecture of her collarbone. Each touch sent that now familiar energy between them, but intensified 100-fold, as though the connection flowing between their bodies had been waiting for this surrender. "I've never," Kathleen gasped, as his hands discovered her body arching instinctively into his touch. "Not since Ryan. Never like this." Jim raised his head to meet her gaze, needing her to know the truth of his heart before they crossed this final threshold. "I've had lovers," he confessed, "but I've never made love. Not until you. The distinction was everything." In Kathleen's arms, Jim wasn't a dying billionaire seeking distraction or comfort, but a man discovering the sacred territory of genuine connection. Each caress transcended physical pleasure, carrying currents of healing, of recognition, of coming home after a lifetime of wandering. As their bodies joined in the moonlight, the miracle deepened between them. The pain that had awakened Jim transformed completely, reborn as waves of pleasure that crested and broke against shores of sensation he'd never known existed. Kathleen moved with him, as though they'd danced this dance in other lifetimes. Her body a perfect counterpoint to his, her whispered endearments washing over him like baptism. "I've searched forever to find you," Jim murmured against her skin, the words emerging from some place deeper than conscious thought, echoing his whisper. From the storm night, Kathleen's eyes, luminous in the darkness, held his with breathtaking vulnerability. "And now that you've found me, now I'm never letting go," he vowed, sealing the promise with a kiss that contained everything he couldn't yet put into words: dedication, wonder, passion, and something suspiciously close to forever. When they finally lay still, limbs entangled, breath gradually slowing, Jim marveled at the absence of pain in his body. For the first time since diagnosis, he felt whole, healthy, alive with possibility rather than shrouded in inevitable ending. Kathleen's fingers traced lazy patterns on his chest, directly over the heart where cells had been steadily dying but now seemed to pulse with renewed vigor. "Your doctor wouldn't believe this," she murmured, a smile in her voice. "That making love with you is better medicine than anything science has developed." Jim pressed a kiss to her temple, breathing in the scent of wild heather that clung to her hair. "Perhaps not, but I'm beginning to believe anything is possible." As moonlight silvered their entwined bodies, neither spoke the deeper truth hovering between them, that what they discovered transcended physical healing, transcended even the extraordinary connection of their bodies. What flowed between them now was love in its purest form, a recognition of souls that had perhaps always been destined to find each other across time and circumstance, and the vast divide of their different worlds. Morning found them still entwined, awakening to the changed reality between them. Kathleen's head rested on Jim's chest, her copper hair spread across his skin like fire, her hand still protectively covering his heart as though guarding the fragile miracle of its continued beating. Jim watched her sleep, overwhelmed by emotions he'd never expected to experience. Tenderness so acute it bordered on pain, protectiveness fierce enough to move mountains, joy so pure it brought tears to his eyes. For a man who had built his life on calculation and control, these feelings were revolutionary, terrifying, and exquisite. When Kathleen's eyes finally opened, meeting his with shy wonder, Jim knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever time he had left, whether days or decades, would be measured not in business achievements or biotechnology breakthroughs, but in moments like this, with this extraordinary woman in his arms. "Good morning," he whispered, brushing copper strands from her cheek. Kathleen's smile was radiant despite her obvious uncertainty. "Is it still good in the light of day?" Instead of answering with words, Jim reached for the remote that controlled his bedroom curtains. As sunlight flooded the room, he cupped her face between his palms, ensuring she could see the absolute truth in his eyes. "It's better," he promised, watching joy bloom across her features like dawn. "Everything is better with you." A soft knock at the bedroom door startled them both. "Mom?" Lily's voice called. "Are you in there? I can't find my elephant socks." Kathleen's eyes widened in momentary panic before softening with maternal practicality. The reality of their new life together, not just lovers but a family forming, crystallized in that simple moment. "Just a minute, sweetheart," Kathleen called, her voice remarkably steady as she quickly gathered her nightgown. Before leaving Jim's bed, she leaned down for one more kiss, this one sweet with promise. "This is real," she whispered against his. Lips half statement, half question. Jim's hand cupped her cheek, his eyes holding hers with unwavering certainty. "More real than anything I've ever known." As Kathleen slipped from the room to help her daughter prepare for the day, Jim watched her go with the wonder of a man who'd been granted not just a reprieve from death, but a reason to truly live. Neither could know that the true miracle and mystery of their connection was only beginning to reveal itself, that the inexplicable healing between them would soon face its greatest test, and that the answer to Jim's survival might lie in a secret buried in Kathleen's family history waiting to be discovered. Chapter 7, Blood Bonds. 3 weeks after Kathleen and Lily moved into Jim's penthouse, Dr. Eaton requested an urgent meeting. His expression as he entered Jim's home office, a folder clutched tightly in his hands, sent a chill through the room despite the warm spring sunshine streaming through the windows. "We've isolated something remarkable in your blood samples," he announced without preamble, spreading charts and reports across Jim's desk. "Ms. Shannon, would you join us, please? This concerns you directly." Kathleen, who had been helping Lily with an art project in the living room, appeared in the doorway, her face paling at the doctor's serious tone. "What is it?" "Your proximity to Jim isn't just psychological comfort," Dr. Eaton explained, pointing to complex molecular structures on one of the pages. "Your body naturally produces an unusual compound, a protein we've never documented before. The molecular structure is fascinating. It appears to have immunomodulatory properties that directly counteract the autoimmune response causing Jim's condition." Jim reached for Kathleen's hand, that familiar healing warmth flowing between them at the contact. "So there's scientific evidence of what we've felt all along." "More than that," Dr. Eaton continued, his expression complex. "We wanted to understand why Ms. Shannon produces this compound when it's not present in the general population, so we ran a comprehensive genetic analysis." Something in his tone made Jim's heart stutter. "And?" The doctor hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "There are genetic markers suggesting a potential familial connection between you two." The words hung in the air like poison. Jim felt Kathleen's hand go rigid in his grasp. "What kind of connection?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Nothing immediate," Dr. Eaton clarified quickly, "but enough shared genetic material to suggest common ancestry within a few generations, possibly through a shared great-grandparent." Horror dawned across Kathleen's features as she withdrew her hand from Jim's, taking an instinctive step backward. "That's not possible." "We've run the tests multiple times," Dr. Eaton said gently. "The genetic similarity is unusual but clear. Your remarkable compatibility, the way your cells seem to communicate with Jim's, may actually result from shared ancestry." Jim felt the room tilting around him, his mind racing to process the implications. The woman he'd fallen in love with, whose touch healed him, whose body had entwined with his in moments of transcendent connection, might be his distant relative. "There must be a mistake," he insisted, watching Kathleen wrap her arms around herself, as though suddenly cold. "Science doesn't lie," Dr. Eaton said, though his expression was compassionate. "I understand this is disturbing news, but it may explain the remarkable healing effect Ms. Shannon has on your condition." Shared genetic material sometimes creates unexpected biological compatibilities. Did you verify the samples? Kathleen demanded, her scientific knowledge surprising the doctor. Did you rule out cross-contamination? What about the chain of custody? Dr. Eaton blinked, taken aback by her technical questions. All standard protocols were followed, but we can certainly retest with fresh samples if you wish. I insist, she said, her voice strained but determined. After the doctor left, promising further analysis, silence descended like a shroud. Kathleen stood by the window, her back to Jim, her slender frame rigid with tension. Kathleen, Jim began, reaching for words that wouldn't come. This doesn't change, doesn't it? She turned, her eyes swimming with tears. We can't just ignore this, Jim. We don't know for certain, he argued, desperate to hold on to what they'd found together. One test isn't conclusive. But what if it's true? Her voice broke on the question. What if all this time what we thought was love was just some twisted biological connection between relatives? The word love hovered between them, never before spoken so directly, now tainted by uncomfortable possibility. I know what I feel, Jim insisted, moving toward her, stopping when she flinched away. That goes beyond biology. Kathleen closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. My grandmother came from County Wicklow in Ireland. Where was your mother's family from? Jim felt ice form in his veins. Wicklow, he admitted reluctantly. My maternal grandmother was born there before immigrating. A soft, broken sound escaped Kathleen's lips. We can't do this, Jim. We can't continue without knowing for certain. Then we'll find out, he promised fervently. We'll trace both family trees, confirm or disprove the connection. But don't pull away from me, Kathleen. My condition is precisely why I can't stay right now, she interrupted, wiping tears with trembling fingers. I won't let you die, Jim, but I also can't be with you until we know the truth. Her meaning was painfully clear. The intimacy they'd shared, the passion that had sustained them both, was now forbidden territory, clouded by taboo possibility. That night, Kathleen moved herself and Lily into the guest suite at the opposite end of the penthouse. She continued preparing her herbal remedies for Jim, continued sitting with him daily, but maintained careful physical distance, no longer allowing the casual touches that had become their lifeline. Within days, Jim's condition began deteriorating. Again, not as rapidly as before Kathleen entered his life, but steadily enough that Dr. Eaton's concern deepened with each visit. Your body seems to require more than just proximity, he observed after a particularly thorough examination. The physical connection you shared was apparently critical to the healing process. Jim said nothing, watching Kathleen's face crumble at the doctor's words before she composed herself with visible effort. The agony of being near her, yet unable to touch her as he longed to, was becoming its own kind of terminal illness. After a week of this careful distance, Jim returned from a necessary board meeting to find Kathleen gone, a note left on the kitchen counter in her elegant handwriting. Taking Lily to visit my grandmother's friend in Brooklyn. Need to find answers. Back tomorrow. That night, alone in the penthouse that now felt hollow without Kathleen's presence, Jim collapsed in his bathroom, pain radiating through his body with unprecedented force. As darkness closed around his vision, he understood with terrible clarity that his condition was accelerating without Kathleen's healing touch. In Brooklyn, Kathleen sat in a small apartment crowded with books and plants, listening as Eliza Murphy, her grandmother's oldest friend, poured tea with hands gnarled by arthritis. May never spoke of any connection to the Shaw family, Eliza mused, responding to Kathleen's careful questions, but she did once mention treating a pregnant woman from Wicklow who'd married into wealth. Kathleen's heart stuttered. When was this? Oh, decades ago, before you were born, the woman was expecting her first child and experiencing terrible complications. Doctors had given up hope, but May used her midnight bloom remedy, saved both mother and child. Did she ever mention the woman's name? Kathleen pressed, hands tightening around her teacup. Eliza's brow furrowed in concentration. Victoria, I believe. Yes, Victoria Shaw, Jim's mother. Kathleen felt the room spin around her. Eliza, noticing her distress, patted her hand gently. Dear, what's troubling you so? I need to see my grandmother's journals, Kathleen whispered, all of them. Hours later, surrounded by faded, leather-bound books filled with May Shannon's flowing script, Kathleen found what she sought, entries from 40 years ago detailing the treatment of Victoria Shaw's difficult pregnancy. May the 12th. Victoria's condition worsens. The child struggles within her, both rejecting and needing the mother's body. I have prepared the midnight bloom tincture, strengthened with my own blood, to create the bonding element. If the ancient ways hold true, this will create harmony between mother and child's warring cells. Kathleen's hands trembled as she turned pages, reading her grandmother's methodical documentation of Jim's mother's treatment. She found the final entry just as dawn was breaking outside Eliza's windows. June 30th, Victoria delivered a healthy son today. The midnight bloom harmony worked as the old ways promised. My blood carries the binding agent that allows mother and child cells to recognize each other as kin rather than enemy. The boy will carry this marker forever, a biological memory of healing. Should he ever encounter another bearing the same marker, their cells would recognize each other at the deepest level, not as blood relations, but as perfect biological matches created through ancient science. Victoria has named him James, after her father. May he carry the strength of both his bloodlines. Understanding crashed over Kathleen like a wave. Not blood relation, but biological harmony created through her grandmother's ancient remedies. The genetic markers Dr. Eaton had identified weren't evidence of shared ancestry, but of her grandmother's healing work, the same compounds now present in Kathleen's blood through inherited traits and her continued practice of May's traditions. As this revelation settled in her heart, Kathleen's phone rang. Dr. Eaton's voice was tense with urgency. Jim's been admitted to the hospital in critical condition. His body is shutting down rapidly. You need to come immediately. Without hesitation, Kathleen gathered the journals and ran into the breaking dawn, desperate to reach the man whose cells recognized hers not as family, but as salvation. The other half of a healing miracle begun before either of them was born. Chapter 8. Veiled Truth. Rain pounded against the hospital windows, each drop like a finger tapping out the seconds of Jim's fading life. Advanced medical equipment surrounded his bed, their digital displays monitoring vital signs with clinical precision, the steady beeping a counterpoint to the storm raging outside. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, his once vibrant eyes sunken in their sockets as Callister syndrome accelerated its claim on his body. Dr. Eaton stood at the foot of the bed, his expression grim as he reviewed the latest readings with the team of specialists gathered in hushed consultation. Multiple organ systems are beginning to fail, he explained, pointing to critical indicators on the nearest monitor. The disease has progressed more in 24 hours than it should. In weeks, the autoimmune response has become catastrophic. In the corridor outside, Jim's executive team waited, their faces drawn with concern, not just for their CEO, but for the global enterprise that hung in the balance. Already, rumors of his condition had leaked to financial markets, sending Shaw Innovation's stock plummeting as investors panicked about the future of the biotech giant without its visionary founder. The board is requesting hourly updates, Jim's chief operating officer murmured to the company attorney. "We need to prepare contingency statements for the press and shareholders." "The Hong Kong branch is already in crisis mode," another executive added. "Their markets open to the news about Jim's hospitalization." None of that mattered to Jim as he drifted in and out of consciousness. In his lucid moments, he felt only Kathleen's absence, like a physical wound, more devastating than his disease. In his delirium, he called her name, reaching for a phantom touch that had become his only medicine. When his lawyer arrived with documents requiring urgent signature, Jim roused himself through sheer force of will. With a trembling hand, he signed the papers transferring the bulk of his personal fortune, separate from company holdings, into irrevocable trusts for Kathleen and Lily. "She doesn't know about this?" the lawyer asked, carefully organizing the signed documents. Jim shook his head weakly. "She wouldn't accept it if I offered directly. This way, she'll have no choice." His voice, once commanding in boardrooms across the globe, had diminished to a whisper. "Make sure Lily's education is secured through doctorate level, if she wants it. Make sure Kathleen can open her wellness center based on her grandmother's traditions." As the lawyer departed with what amounted to Jim's last will and testament, Dr. Eaton returned with a specialist who'd flown in from Switzerland. Their expressions held the careful neutrality of physicians delivering news they knew would not be welcomed. "Jim," Dr. Eaton began gently, "we've reviewed all options. There's an experimental immunotherapy protocol we'd like to attempt." "No," Jim interrupted, summoning strength from his dwindling reserves. "No more experiments? No more treatments?" The Swiss specialist frowned. "Mr. Shaw, without intervention, our projections indicate you have perhaps 48 hours. The cellular degradation is accelerating beyond anything we've documented in this disease." A smile ghosted across Jim's pale lips. "Then I'll have 48 hours of peace." He turned his face toward the storm-lashed windows. Sometimes acceptance is the final victory. Reluctantly, the doctors withdrew, leaving orders for comfort measures only. As darkness fell, the hospital corridor gradually emptied of executives and specialists, leaving only the constant rhythm of machines monitoring a life slipping inexorably away. Miles across the city, Kathleen burst through her apartment door, soaked from the rain. Her grandmother's journals clutched protectively against her chest. Lily was safely with Mrs. Abernathy, allowing Kathleen to focus entirely on the desperate race against time. With trembling hands, she spread the journals across her small kitchen table, along with the medical reports Dr. Eaton had shared. The revelation she'd discovered in her grandmother's writings burned in her mind like fire. Not blood relation, but biological harmony, a perfect cellular match created through ancient science rather than family connection. The doctor's genetic test had detected the shared markers her grandmother had created, mistaking them for evidence of familial connection. The flowers harvested at midnight, the binding agent in May Shannon's blood, passed down through generations to Kathleen. All creating a biochemical key that precisely fit the lock of Jim's condition. Her phone rang. Dr. Eaton again. "Kathleen, Jim has refused all treatment. His body is shutting down rapidly. If there's anything in your grandmother's remedies that might help, anything at all." "The tests were wrong," Kathleen interrupted, her voice cracking with emotion. "We are not related. It was my grandmother's healing treatment during his mother's pregnancy that created the markers your tests detected." Silence stretched across the line before Dr. Eaton responded cautiously. "Can you prove this?" "I have her journals documenting everything," Kathleen explained, fingers tracing her grandmother's elegant script. The midnight bloom essence combined with her blood created a unique biochemical pattern that appears in genetic testing as shared markers. But they're not familial. They're scientific, an ancient form of immunomodulation that modern medicine hasn't yet recognized. "Bring everything," Dr. Eaton instructed. "And Kathleen, Hurry, Jim's condition is deteriorating by the hour. The journey to the hospital became a nightmare obstacle course as the storm intensified. Streets flooded beneath Kathleen's taxi, forcing detours through unfamiliar neighborhoods. Traffic snarled as signals failed throughout the grid, turning major intersections into chaotic standstills. When the cab could go no further through the rising water, she continued on foot, clutching a small vial containing the midnight bloom essence fortified with her own blood, the same remedy her grandmother had created 4 decades earlier. Lightning split the sky as Kathleen finally reached the hospital, drenched and breathless. At the reception desk, she was told that Jim's floor had been restricted to essential personnel only. "I am essential," she insisted, desperation making her voice raw. "His life depends on me being there." Security was called. Forms were presented. Precious minutes ticked away as bureaucracy crawled forward. Finally, Dr. Eaton appeared, summoned by a nurse who recognized Kathleen from previous visits. "She's authorized," he declared, dismissing the security officers with a wave. As they hurried toward the elevator, he updated her in clipped, clinical phrases. Multiple organ systems failing, accelerated cellular death, minimal response to palliative measures. "Is he conscious?" Kathleen asked, clutching the precious vial like a talisman. "Intermittently," Dr. Eaton replied as the elevator doors closed. "He's been asking for you." When they reached Jim's room, Kathleen froze in the doorway, her heart shattering at the sight of him. The vibrant, powerful man who had held her with such strength now lay diminished, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped with mechanical indifference. His chest barely rose with each shallow breath, his skin translucent against the white hospital linens. "Jim," she whispered, moving to his bedside as though drawn by invisible threads. His eyelids fluttered at the sound of her voice. When they opened, his eyes, those remarkable eyes that had looked at her with such wonder, were clouded with pain and medication. For a terrible moment, Kathleen feared he wouldn't recognize her. Then his lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "You came back," he murmured, his voice so faint she had to lean close to hear him. "I never left," Kathleen answered, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "Not in my heart." She took his hand between both of hers, feeling the familiar healing energy spark between them, though fainter now as his life ebbed. "Jim, the test was wrong. We're not related." Confusion flickered across his features. "The genetic markers were created by my grandmother," Kathleen explained urgently, aware of each precious second ticking away. "She treated your mother during her pregnancy with you. The markers aren't evidence of shared blood, but of her healing work." Hope, fragile and tentative, dawned in Jim's eyes. "You're certain?" "I found her journals," Kathleen said, her thumbs tracing circles on his palms. "She documented everything. The midnight bloom essence with her blood, as a binding agent, created harmony between your cells and your mother's, preventing her body from rejecting you before birth. That same harmony exists between us now, not because we share ancestors, but because I carry my grandmother's healing legacy in my blood." Jim's fingers tightened weakly around hers. "So what we felt was real," Kathleen finished, bringing his hand to her lips, pressing a kiss to his knuckles. "Real and true and us." Dr. Eaton cleared his throat from the doorway, where he'd been conferring with the Swiss specialist. "Miss Shannon, if you have something that might help." Kathleen released Jim's hand long enough to uncap the small vial she'd prepared. "This contains the midnight bloom essence with my blood as the binding agent, the same remedy my grandmother used for Jim's mother. According to her journals, it should create cellular harmony, allowing my body's natural production of the counteracting protein to synchronize with Jim's systems." The doctor's scientific skepticism warred visibly with desperate hope. "How is it administered?" "Intravenously," Kathleen answered, handing him the vial. "And with this." She leaned down, pressing her lips to Jim's in a kiss that contained all the love and fear and hope tangled in her heart. As their lips met, Jim gasped, his body arching slightly off the bed. The monitors around them began chiming with changed readings as the medical team rushed to administer the essence through his IV line. Dr. Eaton moved quickly to check the equipment, his expression shifting from concern to cautious amazement. His heart rate is stabilizing, oxygen saturation improving. Whatever's in that compound, it's triggering a systemic response. The Swiss specialist stared at the changing numbers on the monitors. "C'est impossible," he muttered, shaking his head. In disbelief, the cellular markers are realigning. It's as though his immune system has suddenly recognized the affected cells as self rather than foreign. Kathleen didn't need machines to tell her what she could feel happening beneath her touch. As she maintained contact with Jim, her body pressed against his, her tears falling onto his face. The connection between them strengthened. That invisible, healing energy flowing freely again, no longer hindered by misunderstanding or separation. "Stay with me," she whispered against his lips, her fingers tangled in his hair. "I've only just found you. Don't leave me now." Hours passed in a vigil, measured by the steady improvement in Jim's vital signs. Kathleen refused to leave his side, maintaining physical contact as her body's natural compounds merged with the essence in his system, creating the harmony her grandmother had documented decades before. Medical staff came and went, drawing blood, checking readings, adjusting medications, their expressions shifting from professional detachment to undisguised wonder as the impossible continued to unfold before them. Word spread through the hospital. The biotech billionaire, whose life had been declared forfeit, was somehow rallying against all medical expectation. Dawn broke over the city, the storm finally subsiding as golden light filtered through the hospital. Windows. Jim opened his eyes, clarity returning to their depths as they focused on Kathleen's exhausted face. "You saved me," he murmured, his voice stronger than it had been in days. Kathleen smiled through fresh tears, relief making her lightheaded. "We saved each other." As morning fully arrived, Dr. Eaton returned with a team of specialists, all marveling at the remarkable turnaround in Jim's condition. Blood was drawn, tests ordered, theories proposed and debated in hushed, excited tones. "It's unprecedented," the Swiss specialist declared, reviewing the latest results. "His cellular structure is actually regenerating. The disease markers are diminishing hourly. We need to document this case for the medical literature." But Jim and Kathleen paid little attention to the medical discussions swirling around them. In the quiet center of the storm they'd weathered, they held each other, whispering truths too precious for others' ears. "I thought I'd lost you," Kathleen confessed, her head resting against his chest where his heart beat with renewed strength. "When I realized what my grandmother had done, that we weren't related but perfectly matched, I was terrified I wouldn't reach you in time." Jim's fingers traced the delicate curve of her cheek, his touch reverent. "You've given me back my life, Kathleen, but more than that, you've given me reason to live it." Outside the private hospital room, the world continued its ceaseless motion. Stock markets responded to news of Jim Shaw's miraculous recovery. Media outlets speculated on the experimental treatment that had saved him. Medical researchers clamored for access to the compound that had reversed a terminal condition. But within their sanctuary, as morning light painted golden patterns across the hospital bed, Jim and Kathleen remained wrapped in their private miracle. Two souls connected by science, ancient and modern, by chance and perhaps destiny, and most of all by a love powerful enough to defeat death itself. Chapter 9. Love's Miracle. Recovery transformed Jim Shaw in ways that transcended the physical. The man who emerged from the hospital 1 week after his miraculous turnaround moved with the deliberate grace of someone reborn. Each step, each breath, each moment a gift he no longer took for granted. Kathleen had refused to leave his side throughout his recovery, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, maintaining their healing connection through constant touch. The medical team documented everything, mystified by the unprecedented reversal of Callister's syndrome's progression. "We're writing a paper for the New England Journal of Medicine," Dr. Eaton informed them on the day of Jim's discharge. "With your permission, of course. The implications for immunotherapy are extraordinary." Jim nodded absently, his attention fixed on Kathleen as she gathered the few personal items they'd accumulated during his hospital stay. Her copper hair was pulled into a careless knot. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from nights of disrupted sleep, and her clothes were wrinkled from too many days of wear. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "Ready to go home?" she asked, catching his gaze. "Home." The word settled in Jim's chest with unprecedented warmth. His penthouse had been merely a residence before Kathleen and Lily entered his life. Now it was the sanctuary where they would continue building whatever this miracle between them might become. Spring had fully blossomed during Jim's hospitalization. As they stepped outside, cherry trees lining the hospital gardens showered them with delicate pink petals that swirled in the gentle breeze like nature's own celebration. Patients in wheelchairs dotted the pathways, their faces turned upward to the healing sunshine. Medical staff moved purposefully between buildings, some pausing to stare with undisguised curiosity at the biotech billionaire whose miraculous recovery had become the talk of the hospital. "I want to walk a bit," Jim said impulsively, dismissing the waiting limousine with a wave. Through the gardens, concern flickered across Kathleen's features. "Are you sure you're strong enough?" In answer, Jim laced his fingers through hers, drawing strength from the connection that had become as necessary as breathing. "With you beside me, I could walk to the ends of the earth." They strolled along winding paths where early roses unfurled. Their first blooms and fountains played melody against stone. Occasionally, a recognition would flash across someone's face. Jim Shaw, the founder of Shaw Innovations, miraculously alive despite rumors of terminal illness. Whispers followed them, the incongruous couple drawing curious glances, the immaculately dressed CEO despite his recent hospitalization, and the simply attired woman whose hand he held as though it were his lifeline. Jim guided Kathleen to a secluded bench beneath a flowering cherry tree, its branches creating a cathedral of blossoms above them. After they sat, he turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "The lawyer visited me yesterday while you were getting coffee," he began, his voice steady, despite the nervous anticipation building in his chest. Kathleen's eyebrows rose in question. "Is everything all right with the company?" "The company is fine," Jim assured her. "My COO has managed admirably in my absence. This was about my personal affairs. When I thought I was dying, I made certain arrangements." He paused, gauging her reaction. "I transferred significant assets into trusts for you and Lily." Shock widened Kathleen's jade-green eyes. "Jim, you didn't need to. I wanted to ensure you would never struggle again," he interrupted gently. "That Lily would have every educational opportunity, that your dream of opening a wellness center based on your grandmother's traditions could become reality." Emotions chased across Kathleen's expressive face: gratitude, discomfort, uncertainty. "I never wanted your money," she whispered. "I know," Jim said, squeezing her hands gently. "That's precisely why I want you to have it, because you love the man, not the fortune." A tear spilled down Kathleen's cheek as she looked away, her gaze following a butterfly dancing among the flowers. "People will talk. They already are. Look around us. They see me and think I'm some kind of opportunist, the cleaning woman who somehow snagged a billionaire when he was vulnerable." "Let them talk," Jim replied, his voice hardening with conviction. "Their opinions matter nothing against what we know to be true." When Kathleen remained silent, her internal struggle evident, in the tension of her shoulders, Jim released her hands and reached inside his jacket, withdrawing a small velvet box. The gesture caught Kathleen's attention, her breath audibly catching as she recognized its significance. "I've been carried by ambition my entire adult life," Jim said, his voice softening with emotion. "Building Shaw Innovations from one successful drug patent to a global biotech leader, accumulating wealth beyond reason, yet finding no lasting satisfaction in any of it." He opened the box, revealing not a massive diamond as might be expected from a man of his wealth, but an antique emerald ring set in delicate gold filigree. "Then I received my death sentence, and in what I thought were my final months, I found the only true treasure worth having: you." Cherry blossoms continued falling around them like nature's blessing as Jim slid from the bench to one knee before her, ignoring the dampness of the grass seeping through his expensive trousers. "Kathleen Shannon, you gave me life when I was dying. You gave me love when I was alone. You gave me truth when I was lost in my own illusions of what mattered." His voice broke slightly, raw emotion making it rough. "If you'll have me, I want to spend whatever days we have, whether they're numbered or endless, cherishing you as you deserve, raising Lily as my own, and building a life that honors the miracle we've been given." Tears flowed freely down Kathleen's cheeks now, her hands trembling as Jim presented the ring. "This was my grandmother's," he explained, "the only heirloom I've ever truly valued. Her eyes were the same remarkable green as yours." "Jim," Kathleen whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "there will be so many obstacles. My world and yours are one world now," he finished for her. "Our world, together." A young intern passing by stopped to watch the scene unfolding, nudging her colleague. Soon a small cluster of onlookers had gathered at a respectful distance, drawn by the unmistakable tableau of a proposal. The whispers intensified. "That's Jim Shaw, the biotech guy. Wasn't he dying? Who's she? Is he actually on one knee?" For one heart-stopping moment, Jim feared she might refuse, might choose the safety of her familiar life over the complex future he offered. Then she slid from the bench to kneel before him in the grass. Their positions equalized in a gesture that spoke volumes about the relationship they were building. "Yes," she said simply, framing his face between her palms. "Yes, I will marry you, Jim Shaw." A spontaneous burst of applause erupted from their impromptu audience, causing Kathleen to blush and Jim to laugh with surprised delight. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit as though destined, a young patient in a wheelchair called out, "Kiss her already!" bringing laughter from everyone within earshot. When their lips met, sealing their promise with a kiss that contained equal measures of passion and tenderness, the applause grew louder. Cherry blossoms continued falling around them like snow, nature's own confetti celebrating their union. "I never expected an audience," Kathleen murmured against his lips, her eyes dancing with a mixture of embarrassment and joy. "Get used to it," Jim whispered back. "I'm planning to love you spectacularly and without apology for the rest of our lives." As they walked back toward the waiting car, hand in hand with matching smiles, a reporter who had been visiting a sick relative recognized Jim and approached with a recorder. "Mr. Shaw, there are rumors about a miraculous recovery from Callister's syndrome. Care to comment? And who is your companion?" Jim glanced at Kathleen, silently asking permission. When she gave a small nod, he faced the reporter with the confidence that had built his empire. "This is Kathleen Shannon, my fiancée, and the woman who saved my life through a remarkable combination of ancient healing traditions and modern science." His arm slid around Kathleen's waist, drawing her close. "Beyond that, I suggest you speak with Dr. Eaton about the medical aspects. What matters most isn't how I survived, but why. And she's the reason." Later, as they drove through the city, Streets toward home, toward Lily waiting with Mrs. Abernathy, toward their future together. Kathleen studied the emerald ring glinting on her finger, its vintage setting a perfect complement to her simple elegance. "Are you having second thoughts?" Jim asked, noticing her contemplative silence. "No," she answered, her voice sure despite the magnitude of the changes before them. "I'm having first thoughts about a life I never imagined possible, about introducing you properly to Lily as someone who's going to stay in our lives, about building something meaningful from your wealth rather than just existing alongside it." Jim's hand covered hers, their fingers intertwining with that now familiar healing connection flowing between them. "We'll build it together. Your knowledge and my resources, your compassion and my reach, my technology and your traditions." As the car pulled up to the building that housed Jim's penthouse, photographers who had somehow learned of his discharge from the hospital were waiting. Kathleen tensed at the sight of cameras, but Jim simply squeezed her hand. "We can take the service entrance if you prefer," he offered, "or we can walk in together, showing the world exactly what matters to me now." Kathleen took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders with quiet dignity. "Together," she decided, "always together." And so they stepped from the car into the flashing cameras, Jim's arm protective around Kathleen's waist, their faces illuminated not just by the media lights, but by the inner glow of two people who had found in each other something rare and precious, a love powerful enough to transcend social boundaries, to reverse terminal diagnosis, to create from ancient wisdom and modern science a miracle that would soon change the face of medicine itself. Chapter 10. Hearts Entwined. The hospital garden where Jim had proposed transformed over 3 weeks of meticulous planning into a floral wonderland. Rose-covered arches formed a winding path leading to a central gazebo draped with midnight blooming jasmine, a tribute to the flowers that had begun their extraordinary journey. Medical researchers from around the world had descended upon the city, drawn by Dr. Eaton's preliminary paper documenting Jim's unprecedented recovery. Blood samples, genetic analyses, and endless tests had become routine for both Jim and Kathleen as science struggled to understand what ancient wisdom had created, a perfect biological harmony between two unrelated people whose cells recognized each other at the molecular level. "They're calling it the Shannon Protocol in the research community," Jim told Kathleen as they reviewed final preparations for their garden ceremony. "Your grandmother's methods, combined with your intuitive adaptations, have opened an entirely new field of immunotherapy." Kathleen smiled, her fingers automatically finding his as they walked among the flowers. Nana May would have laughed at scientists taking 40 years to discover what she already knew through ancient tradition. The connection between them had only strengthened with time. Jim's recovery continued to astound his medical team, his body showing no traces of the disease that had nearly claimed his life. The autoimmune response had completely reversed, leaving his cellular structure healthier than before the diagnosis. Though doctors insisted on monthly checkups, both Jim and Kathleen knew with bone-deep certainty that the Callister's syndrome would not return as long as they remained together. Jim had stepped back from daily operations at Shaw Innovations, appointing a trusted president while he maintained only strategic oversight. Instead, he'd established a new research foundation dedicated to integrating traditional healing methods with modern medical science, with Kathleen as his partner in the endeavor. His priorities had fundamentally shifted: corporate conquests, replaced by quieter victories, Lily's delighted smile when he helped her master a difficult reading passage, Kathleen's peaceful expression as they worked together in the rooftop garden they'd created. Moments of ordinary joy that his former self would have considered insignificant, but now recognized as the very essence of a life well lived. On the morning of their wedding, Kathleen stood in what had once been the guest suite, but had since become their shared master bedroom, surrounded by simple elegance. She had refused Jim's offer of designer gowns, choosing instead a dress of ivory silk that her grandmother's friend Eliza had helped create. Its bodice embroidered with midnight bloom flowers in silver thread, its lines gracefully skimming her slender frame. "You look like a princess," Lily declared, twirling in her own pale blue dress, flower crowns slightly askew on her dark curls. In the weeks since Jim's recovery, the child had blossomed in his presence, her initial shyness giving way to complete acceptance as she discovered his genuine interest in her world. Kathleen bent to straighten her daughter's crown, heart overflowing, with gratitude for this child who had accepted Jim with such immediate and complete love. "Are you happy, my darling?" she asked, searching those innocent eyes for any hidden concerns. Lily nodded emphatically. "Jim teaches me chess even when I forget the rules, and he doesn't get mad when I can't read the hard words. And he's building me a special computer that knows how to read to me when the letters get mixed up." Her expression turned serious, beyond her years. "But most important, Mommy, he makes you smile again. Your real smile, not your brave one." Tears threatened, but Kathleen blinked them away, unwilling to redo her simple makeup. A soft knock at the door preceded Eliza's entrance, the elderly woman's eyes misting as she took in the sight before her. "May would be so proud," she said, her voice quavering with emotion. "She always said you were born with healing in your hands and love in your heart. Now look what those gifts have brought you." Outside, guests were gathering in the garden, an eclectic mixture reflecting the bride and groom's different worlds now merging into one. Shaw Innovations executives in bespoke suits mingled with Kathleen's fellow night cleaners and their families. Medical researchers engaged in animated conversation with herbalists Kathleen had connected with through her grandmother's network. Lily's teachers chatted with Jim's business associates, all united in celebration of a love story that had defied every convention. In the center of it all stood Jim, resplendent in a simple charcoal suit, his face transformed by joy and health as he awaited his bride. The media clamor surrounding their engagement had gradually subsided, replaced by genuine public interest in the Shannon Protocol that was showing promise for treating other autoimmune conditions. The tabloid speculation about the night cleaner, who had trapped a billionaire, had given way to respectful coverage of their pioneering work in integrative medicine. As the string quartet began playing, Jim's eyes found Dr. Eaton among the guests. The physician, who had guided them through the darkest days of Jim's illness, now stood witness to the culmination of their journey, his scientific skepticism forever changed by what he had witnessed between them. The music shifted, and the assembled guests rose as Kathleen appeared at the beginning of the rose-covered pathway. With Lily preceding her, scattering petals with enthusiastic abandon, Kathleen moved toward Jim with grace that belied her humble origins. The emerald ring glinted on her finger, catching sunlight as she walked toward her future. Jim's breath caught at the sight of her, not just her physical beauty, though that was undeniable, but the inner radiance that had first drawn him to her. On that fateful night in his office, the woman who had seen him not as a powerful CEO, but simply as a man in pain, the woman whose touch had literally saved his life. When she reached him, taking his outstretched hand with the same simple directness that characterized everything about her, the healing energy flowed between them as powerfully as ever. This current that science was still struggling to define, but that they understood in their souls, the perfect resonance of two beings meant to complete each other. "You are breathtaking," Jim whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "And you are alive," Kathleen whispered back, their private shorthand for everything they'd overcome together. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, incorporating elements of Kathleen's Celtic heritage alongside Jim's more traditional preferences. When the time came for their vows, Jim spoke first, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed garden. Kathleen, before I met you, I measured success in acquisitions and achievements. I built an empire, but no home. I extended others' lives. Through medical innovation, while never truly living my own. His fingers tightened around hers. You found me at my lowest moment and showed me what real wealth looks like: connection, compassion, courage in the face of life's greatest challenges. You didn't just save my life. You gave me reason to live it fully. Tears glistened in Kathleen's eyes as she responded. Jim, I once believed that worlds like yours and mine could never truly meet, that people were divided by circumstance and destiny into separate existences. You shattered those barriers with your humility, your generosity, your willingness to see me as an equal when the world insisted I was beneath you. Her voice strengthened with conviction. I promise to partner with you in all things, to honor both the scientific brilliance that built your company and the ancient wisdom that saved your life, to raise Lily with both our strengths, to face whatever comes next, knowing that together we've already overcome the impossible. As they exchanged rings, his a simple platinum band, hers the antique emerald now accompanied by a matching wedding ring, the gathered witnesses sensed they were observing something beyond the ordinary. Not just two people joining lives, but two worlds merging, two traditions honoring each other, two souls recognizing what they had perhaps always been seeking. By the authority vested in me, the officiant declared, and with joy witnessed by all present, I now pronounce you husband and wife. When Jim gathered Kathleen into his arms for their first kiss as married partners, applause erupted across the garden. Lily darted forward to wrap her arms around both their legs, creating a family tableau that brought fresh tears to many eyes. The reception that followed was as unconventional as the couple themselves. Instead of a formal dinner, food stations offered everything from gourmet cuisine to comfort foods. The band played a mixture of classical pieces and popular dance numbers. Lily flitted between guest clusters, proudly introducing herself as Lily Shannon Shaw to anyone who would listen. As evening approached, the garden was transformed by thousands of twinkling lights and dozens of lanterns floating in the central pond. Jim led Kathleen to the dance floor for their first dance, drawing her close as the music began. Happy? He murmured against her temple. Beyond words, she answered, her head resting naturally against his chest, where a heart, once failing now, beat with steady strength. I keep expecting to wake up back in my apartment, to discover this has all been an extraordinary dream. Jim's hand splayed against the small of her back, drawing her closer. If it's a dream, then we're sharing it, and I have no intention of waking up. As they moved together in perfect synchronicity, their joined selves continuing their silent, healing conversation beneath the conscious level, guests watched with varying degrees of understanding. Some saw only the fairy tale, the billionaire, and the cleaner defying social convention. Others, particularly those from the medical community, observed with scientific interest the physical manifestation of the Shannon Protocol in its most perfect expression. But those closest to them, Eliza with her connection to Kathleen's grandmother, Dr. Eaton, who had witnessed the miracle of Jim's recovery, Lily, with a child's uncanny intuition, saw the truth. That beyond science, beyond social boundaries, beyond even the ancient healing traditions that had brought them together, what flowed between Jim and Kathleen was the most profound force in existence. A love powerful enough to transform cells, to rewrite medical understanding, to bridge worlds thought unbridgeable. As the midnight hour approached, Jim led Kathleen to the center of the garden, where the midnight blooms were just beginning to open, their delicate fragrance filling the air with sweet promise. "Look," he said softly, pointing to where the first blossom unfurled its petals toward the stars. The flowers that began our story, Kathleen's fingers intertwined with his as they watched nature's quiet miracle unfold. "They only bloom at midnight," she murmured, echoing her words from their first meeting. "The moment when today's sorrows end and tomorrow's possibilities begin." Jim turned to her, framing her face between his palms with exquisite tenderness. "In a world where I could buy anything," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion, "you were the only thing I needed, my soul's only antidote." As their lips met beneath the star-filled sky, surrounded by flowers that science said shouldn't heal, but somehow did, both knew with bone-deep certainty that in finding each other they had discovered the rarest miracle of all, a love, powerful, enough to defy death itself, to unite separate worlds, to create from ancient wisdom and modern science a future neither could have imagined alone, but both now embraced together.